These people don't exist, but they feel real. As a content creator, you know the dream, having the perfect digital actor, the ability to cast any face, control any light, and set any scene, without a budget of millions, of course. But most of what you see online looks like plastic, uncanny and soulless. The difference between that and this isn't the tool, it's the direction. Today, I'm not just showing you prompts, I'm teaching you a cinematic framework, how to think like a storyteller and talk like a casting director to an AI. Anyone can type a prompt like a portrait of a man in a room, but realism isn't about perfection, it's actually about imperfection. It's the flaws, the physics, the little human inconsistencies that actually convinces the eye. When we look at an image, our brains don't just see, they predict. They expect light to behave in a certain way, like how it bounces off skin, focus to fall off, and edges to blur. When everything is too perfect, when every pore is equally sharp, the brain flags it as wrong. That's the uncanny valley. It's not that it looks fake, it's just that it breaks the rules of how we expect the world to behave. Realism lives in those broken symmetries, like slight asymmetry in the face, uneven tones, natural textures, and subtle emotions. Our pattern detectors crave imperfection. It's how we recognize something as human. So let's talk about how I actually build realism into a prompt. I don't treat prompts like code or JSON structures. In fact, in my experience, natural language prompts work way better. And I don't think of prompt as description. I think of them like a detailed shot list that I can actually hand over to a cinematographer. The AI understands the intent, context, and nuance much better than when I feed it formatted list or brackets. So instead of programming the AI, I actually direct it. And just like in real filmmaking, every great shot starts with the same foundation. For me, that's 5 key parts. The subject. This is the main focus of the scene. The person, the object, or the element that draws the viewer's attention. The subject drives the story and gives purpose to the shot. The environment. So the setting or backdrop where the scene takes place. It provides context, atmospheres, and clues about the story or the subject's world. The lighting. So the way that the light is used to shape the mood, depth, and tone of the scene. Good lighting directs focus, enhances textures, and supports the emotional intent. The emotion. The feeling or mood that the scene conveys, both what the subject expresses and what the viewer experiences. Emotion is what makes the shot resonate. And lastly, the camera setup. So the technical and creative decisions behind how the scene is captured. Framing, angle, lens, and movement. The camera setup defines how the audience perceives everything else. Together, these 5 elements define who the person is, where they exist, how they're lit, what they're feeling, and how the lens captures that moment. Let me show you how that works using one of my own prompts as an example. It starts with the person, a 25-year-old redhead man, thin and pale. That's not perfection, it's identity. Words like very thin and pale anchor him in realism. They make him specific, not generic. Then, sitting on a chair in his living room with an untidy background involving cluttered bags. That gives narrative truth. Real life is rarely staged, so the chaos in the frame actually makes the character feel like they actually live there. Next, high-resolution facial skin detail with uneven tone, soft shadows and highlights. That's where the physics of realism live. Light interacting with real surface texture, smooth equals fake, and uneven equals alive. His expression is calm and confident in direct natural daylight. So you're not describing a pose, you're actually describing a moment. Natural daylight has emotional warmth, and irregular shadows our brains instinctively trust. Finally, shot on a Canon EOS R5 with a shallow depth of field. So the camera language grounds your image in physical reality. It tells the AI how objects behave, not just what to draw. If that level of detail sounds like a lot to write every time, I actually built something to help you. It's called AI Portrait Director. You describe an image naturally, like a woman sitting on a balcony surrounded by plants during daytime, and it turns that into a short, realistic prompt for any AI generator. It fills in missing realism cues like light direction, perspective, texture, atmosphere, and even camera setup, based on mood. So instead of sterile, polished results, you actually get something that feels human and cinematic. Oh, and by the way, it's free to use. Links in the description down below. Now, let's take that prompt and bring it into Seedream. I'm using it through Higgsfield AI, which gives me a clean, fast interface for testing ideas. So under image generation, just make sure that you set the model to Seedream 4.0, or you can also try Nano Banana. I experimented with both, but most of the time I get better, more consistent results with Seedream. Then we can just put in our prompts or use one we generated in the AI portrait director and press generate. And just like any other Gen AI, it might take a few tries until you get something that looks great. Here's another example I did a few generations on. And notice how small cues like wrinkles, skin detail, natural imperfections, tired eyes, and cold fluorescent light actually helps transforming the output from synthetic to believable. Realism actually happens in the words between the words. The subtle physical cues that guide the AI to think like a camera. Seedream actually gives us a really strong foundation, but there's actually one more layer that makes a huge difference, and that's texture. Even the best AI generators tend to smooth skin too much, losing that organic surface detail that our eyes instinctively trust. And that's where I bring in Enhancor AI, a tool that adds back in microtexture and natural imperfection, and in general makes skin look like it reflects light more realistically. So once I got a base image from Seedream, I uploaded it into Enhancor AI. It analyzes the facial regions, it reconstructs the microtexture, and subtly introduces natural surface irregularities. Pores, fine lines, and even the subdermal scattering that gives skin that soft translucency. Notice the difference. Not exaggerated, not retouched, just real. The light behaves differently now, and that's what makes it believable. The surface finally feels like real skin, not a render. So when you combine good prompting, realistic lighting, and true surface texture, that's where you cross the line from AI generated to cinematically human. Once you have your portraits, it's time to bring them to life. I'll be using Seedance by ByteDance, which lets you add minimal organic motion, a slow blink, a soft inhale, a micro head tilt, etc. Keep it subtle, the goal is presence, not animation. So inside Higgsfield here, I have selected Seedance Pro, and I set the duration to 5 seconds, 1080p resolution, and I checked on the multi-shot. So when you check the multi-shot, you can actually divide your 5 seconds into 2 different shots. So here I put the prompt in the first shot to be no camera movement, the girl keeping her gaze while blinking subtly. For the second part, it says medium close-up of her face, faint freckles, slowly blinking once. So again, it's all about subtlety. You don't want to over-animate anything, because that's when you start losing the AI. And then we can just press generate. And just like image generation, it might take a few tries before you actually get it right. So when I animate, I try to keep it simple. Try to avoid full facial rigs or mouth motions. Those instantly push it into uncanny valley. So think of it like directing an actor for a close-up. You're asking for a moment of thought, not a performance. So here's an example of a prompt that I might use. For the first shot, no camera movement, the woman looks at the camera with a tired and neutral expression. Shot 2, close-up of her face, she is tired. To elevate even more from realistic to cinematic, we can finish with a small physical touches. So add a soft film grain, keep gradients gentle, stick to daylight colors temperatures around 5600 kelvins, and avoid HDR-style contrast. Softness always feels truer to life. And if you're making multiple clips, try to match lens and lighting for consistency. There's one last step that brings everything to life: sound. Even a still image feels more real when it exists in sound. A soft ambience, a faint breath, room tone, the buzz of daylight. Our brains tie sound to space, and suddenly the image feels alive. So here we are inside Premiere Pro, and the first thing I want you to think about is try to identify what is the environment and what are we seeing. Can we use sound in any way to highlight? And if the subject is moving, are there any interactions happening that we expect there to be a sound to? So a pro tip is to always layer sounds to give it more richness and depth. Here's a few examples of how I build up this sound design. Here's the first layer. And here's the second layer. And now the third layer. all played together. And here's another one with the first layer. And now the second layer. And finally the third layer. And played together, it sounds like this. So the secret to realistic AI imagery isn't better software, it's actually better direction. Think like a photographer, describe the light, the texture, the emotion. Guide the AI like you're a guide an actor. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Bye.